that we are working with the closed Riemann surfaces, reflects the fact that we are working with closed strings. For open strings, we'll have to include deviance also.
Yeah, so far I've been talking about only closed strings, but you can generalize this to open strings also. Right? There you have to have boundaries. I mean, you have to put some boundary condition on this. Yes.
So that will, for that we can bring the deviance also. Or
Yeah, I mean, open strings automatically, you don't have to talk about deviance. You just think of this as strings with some appropriate boundary condition at the ends, and you can define the amplitudes. Okay? You can reinterpret this as deviance. Yeah, but you can also just think of this as open string theory and appropriate boundary condition.
but this will also have propagator feature.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it will be similar to that. Because this kind of factorization property that we are using, right, the plumbing fixture and all, everything goes through for open strings also. Yes.
The complete basis state that you inserted,
Yes.
so there can those be dependent on the modulus, those files?
No, because those are the basis states at the tree level, right? So the basis states you introduce one
For the space,
for the conformal field theory. Okay? Conformal field theory is always defined on the plane. So the basis states have no dependence on moduli. Basis states are basis states of a conformal field theory, right? You don't even talk about moduli when you introduce the basis states of the CFT.
Direct to various basis states, the choice of the basis that also would not depend on moduli.
No, because the basis states, you are given a conformal field theory, Ising model, right? You know what the basis states are. Right? You take the three primaries of the Ising model, built by L minus n's. Right? Those are your basis states. Right? There, I mean, there is a question of any moduli here. Right? Where are the moduli in that description? Right? You start with primary and apply the L minus n's to generate the whole tower. You turn null states to remove them. Right? That's the way you construct the basis states of the CFT. Right? If it's free field theory, for example, right, like what you have in string theory in flat space time, then the basis states are created by starting with a momentum eigenstate and then applying the alpha minus x, right? There is no notion of any moduli or anything there. And similarly for ghosts, you start with the SL2C invariant vacuum and apply the ghost oscillators. So that's what one means by basis states. There is no notion of any moduli here. Right? And the way we introduce the basis states, the way we insert the complete set of states, right? You first converted the whole thing into a two-point function on the sphere, right? And then the basis states are what appears on the sphere, in quantizing the theory on the sphere or on the cylinder. Right? So this should be clear that the basis states that we are talking about are the basis states of the conformal field theory, right? That they have no knowledge about on which background you put the conformal field theory. Yeah, this is the conformal field theory quantized on the sphere, right? Or another way of saying this, these are the basis of operators, basis of local operators, which you know by the state operator correspondence corresponds to states on a cylinder. Right? When you quantize a theory on a cylinder or on a plane by using radial quantization, you have the state operator correspondence, and those are the basis states that you are referring to. Yeah, there are questions? Okay, so let me begin with some comments. So the first comment is about normalization. Which I wrote some factors, but I didn't examine the full details. So the point is that the total normalization, okay, when you have the final Riemann factors that we had genus G1 plus G2 and the number of punctures was N1 plus N2 minus 2. Right? This was the formula for plumbing fixture. Okay. And the normalization factor that we have been using is 3 minus 3G plus N. So this I can write as minus 2 pi I to the power 3 minus 3G1 plus N1 minus 2 pi I times 3 minus 3g2 plus n2 and whatever is left. Now you can easily check that whatever is left, this n is n1 plus n2 minus 2. Something is wrong. There is minus n here. Minus. So this n is n1 plus n2 minus 2. Okay. So that makes this 3 into a 5. Okay, otherwise you have g is g1 plus g2, n is n1 plus n2. Okay, so this becomes 5. If you compare this, you have 6 here. Okay. Rest of the factors are same. g1 plus g2, n1 plus n2. So we have an extra factor of minus 2 pi inverse.
Comes from dq dq.
Oh, right now we are not, that factor have to be included separately. Okay. This is just that if the overall normalization factor that is relevant for this genus and this number of punctures, okay, we are just trying to write this as a product of something that should appear in the expression for the genus G1 with N1 punctures, something which has genus G with N2 punctures, and whatever is left over, I am calling minus 2 is minus 2 pi inverse. Okay. So this is part of the first factor. Okay, first factor refers to the corresponding amplitude on genus G1 with N1 punctures. So this one will come from the second factor, the amplitude for genus G2 with N2 punctures. And so this one then must be included in the propagator. Right? Because there is no other place where you can absorb this. Okay, this is part of the first amplitude, this is the part of the second amplitude, and then you have two amplitudes under the propagator, so this must be included in the propagator. So then we see the net factor in the propagator as this minus 2 pi I inverse then you have a factor of minus 2i. Let me remind you where it came from. This came because dq over q is dq bar over q bar we got as minus 2i ds over dt. And that's where you have a factor of minus 2i. Then you have a factor of 2 pi. This came from theta integral. Right? Because you have 2 pi of the 2 pi times delta L naught bar. And then the factor that we got L naught plus L naught bar inverse delta L naught L naught. Okay, and then also there is B naught B naught bar. Okay, this of course has to be sandwiched between the appropriate states. So collecting everything we get this to be 2 e to the minus s naught b naught plus l naught bar b naught bar b naught plus l inverse. Okay, so this is the formal problem. Okay, and if you now recall that L naught and L naught bar each comes like k square by 4. Okay, so the sum of the two will have a k square by 2 plus cn. Okay. We see that the propagator is actually 4 over k square plus cn. Okay, in the normalization conversion that we are using, there is a factor of 4 k square plus 2 cn. Okay, so this you can think of this as a mass square, but there is this extra factor of 4 that comes out of it. Okay. The second comment is about the S naught. Now S naught plays an important role because after all you have to sum over all possible states, right? We have phi and c e to the minus s naught times l naught plus l naught bar d naught g naught bar and this is the kind of term we got for the propagator. You see, I am not writing the B0 bar, I can just move them around, right? Because B0 comes to L0, so it doesn't matter where you write. And then you are supposed to sum over M and N, right? There is an amplitude on that side, there is an amplitude on that side, you are supposed to sum over M and N. And as in the case of first lecture, we can argue that as long as S0 is sufficiently large, this sum will converge, right? Because there is an exponential separation factor, also from e to the minus s naught times the L naught by n value. Okay. Number of states grow with L naught plus L naught bar, but that grows exponentially as square root of L naught plus L naught bar. Okay. So for sufficiently large S naught, this will always be. So you can ensure that by choosing S naught to be sufficiently large, that this sum converges. Is this clear? Yeah, because there is an exponential separation factor here. Right? And the degeneracy factor is weaker than this. It goes e to the minus times constant, e to the plus constant times square root of L0 plus L0.
But sir, you said that my total amplitude that shouldn't depend on S0.
Yeah, this shouldn't depend on S0.
So our convergence condition shouldn't depend whether we take.
Well, if this is convergent, then if this is divergent, then that means that something else which is left over is also divergent. You see, this is not a full amplitude, right?
Yes,
Okay, the full amplitude is independent of S naught, but this part of the amplitude may depend on S naught, right?
okay.
So the point is by taking the sum of the two has to be convergent, right? That is independent of the amplitude, but it could happen that by changing S naught you can make this divergent.
And then something else will be.
Something else we can have to cancel this. Okay. So this is good, but nevertheless, we don't want this S naught to hang around because we don't want it to be part of the propagator. Okay, because propagator should be just 1 over k square plus n square, right? It's a non-standard propagator. Okay. So in the first lecture, we have said that it is in principle possible to just absorb this factor into the vortices. Okay? Just take square root of this, absorb it in the left side amplitude, and the other part will absorb in the right hand side amplitude. Yeah? So the propagator is just this. Now this is possible, you can do that, okay? But there is a more formal way of doing this, okay, where you don't see this S naught at all. Okay, so I will now describe how you can get rid of the S naught, okay, from the beginning. But maybe I should also mention one thing before I talk about getting rid of S naught, is the interpretation of large S naught. So, because where did the S parameter appear? We had this W1 N1, W2 N2 as Q, right? This was the Plumbing-Fixer relation that we used, and this is related to S and theta by S minus I. Okay, and the way we interpret this is that we cut out a region of the form W1 N1 equal to mod Q to the half, which in this language will be 2 minus S by 2, and W2 N2 mod Q to the half, which is 2 minus S by 2. So on each Riemann surface, you cut out these regions and then glue them. Okay, then you glue this part to that part. Now, from this you see that large S means that these circles are small size. Okay. Small in quotes in the sense that of course you are using a conformal invariant theory, so you can always rescale the metric by a Weyl transformation, right? So it's not small in that sense, but it's a small conformal. Okay, related to the other W, this is small. Okay, in the global coordinate system, this looks small, and then you join them together. Okay, so large S, essentially the S goes to infinity limit is a degeneration limit. Okay, where the Riemann surface that you get by gluing, that gets pinched because this circle becomes smaller and smaller, this circle gets smaller and smaller. Okay. So it gets pinched, or equivalently, you can think of this as two Riemann surfaces connected by long tube. Okay, that is exponential, that you take the S to be the length of the tube. Now, we are integrating over S, okay, but the integral we have taken to be from S naught to infinity. Now, S naught, if S naught is large, that means you are integrating over S, all of which are close to degeneration. Right? Because S naught is a lower limit and that you are taking to be large. Right? That means all the values of S over which you are integrating are close to degeneration. So large S naught basically means that you will use this Clubbing fixture description only near degeneration. Okay, as S varies from S naught to infinity, you go closer and closer to the Clubbing fixture, but even the beginning point, like S equal to S naught, is already close to degeneration because you have these two small circles which have been grouped. Okay, so it's already pinched even at S equal to S naught. Okay, but now you want to have a formalism where you want to get rid of the S naught, right? So let's see how we can do that. So for this we again go back to the gluing relation. W1, U1, W2, N2 equal to W minus S minus N. And let's suppose that we introduce new local coordinates near these punctures. While the relation W1, N1 is lambda times W2, W1, N1, and W2, N2 is lambda times W2, W. Okay, so these are new local coordinates. So this gluing relation then becomes W tilde 1, W tilde 2 as e to the minus S minus I theta over lambda square, which I write e to the minus S tilde minus I theta tilde where S tilde is S plus 2 log lambda theta tilde is this theta plus log lambda. Okay, let's isolate the real and imaginary ones. Okay, lambda is a complex parameter, so I just pick the exponential limit and then pick the real and imaginary parts. And now you see that as S naught, as S goes from S naught to infinity, S tilde goes from S naught plus 2 log lambda to infinity. Theta tilde is still periodic, right? You have just shifted theta by a constant, right? So theta tilde, okay, instead of from 0 to pi, it will be from some a to pi, 2 pi plus a, okay, but it's makes no difference. But the lower limit of S tilde has now become S naught plus 2 log mod lambda. Okay, and you can choose your lambda too, so that you can cancel this. Right? So this can be made equal to 0 by choosing lambda.
I log lambda.
Pardon? I think that there's a 1 over I problem somewhere, right? Because I theta, let's see,
Theta tilde will be
minus I minus S minus I theta minus 2 log lambda, right? This is what we have. So I can write it as minus S minus I theta minus log lambda bar minus log lambda over lambda bar. So this is minus S plus 2 log mod lambda minus I theta plus minus I log lambda. Yeah, so this is our theta. Okay, which is of course fine because log lambda over lambda bar is imaginary. Right? It carries an I factor. Right? So combined with this it gives a real number. Yeah, so that's what. Okay, so this is what it is saying that whatever was the initial S naught, by choosing your local coordinates, you can make S naught equal to 0. Okay, so the freedom that we had in adjusting S naught, right, will now give up that freedom, okay, but we will utilize the freedom of choosing our local coordinates. And you can see that if S naught was large to begin with, then to make this 0, you need to choose lambda to be small. Okay. And lambda small means what? If you look at this relation over here, okay, then lambda small means that given a unit radius in the w tilde coordinate corresponds to a small radius in the w coordinate. Right? So anything that is less than unit radius in the w tilde 1 coordinate, okay, because and that has to be the case because the gluing will be now done at w tilde 1 n1 as mod q tilde, right? And q tilde is to be minus s tilde minus I theta tilde. Right? So as long as s tilde is positive, the gluing is always done at mod w1 w tilde at some radius that is less than 1. Okay. And anything that has radius less than 1 in w tilde 1 coordinate actually has a small radius in the original coordinate. Okay. So none of the physics has changed. Okay, it's just that it's a useful convention in which the propagator doesn't have any such strange factor. Okay, effectively the factors have been absorbed into the vortices. Right? Because the local coordinate choice has been made. And in the string field theory literature, you will often see this as referred to as adding stubs to the vortices. Okay, the scaling, this freedom of scaling the local coordinate, okay, is often referred to as adding stubs. Yeah. Okay, it's scaling in this language, but if you take the log of this, then it's like adding something, a tube of length lambda to the vortex, okay, to the external vortex. So that's why it's called adding stubs. Okay, but physically it's just rescaling the local coordinates.
So for this transformation, we don't move in MGA, but if
yes, you don't move in MGN, you are just changing your local coordinates.
That's the freedom we are using.
Exactly.
But
So you do move in PGN.
yes, we move in PGA.
Yeah.
But sir, if this S naught was cancelled by a transformation which moves me in MGN, then I couldn't have made this statement.
Well, that will amount to reparameters on the moduli space itself. Okay, you will still do this, right? But ultimately, you have to make sure that you integrate over the whole of MGN, right? You have to integrate over a section, right? Which means that you have to cover the whole of the place.
Yes,
Okay. So far, it has only been local analysis, right? We are not making any claim at this stage that this range of S, right, or S tilde, will cover the whole moduli space or the whole section. Right? He is only saying that this range will cover part of the section. Right? We will soon discuss how to consider the whole section. Okay. And the third comment I wanted to make is that, which I mentioned last time, okay, I didn't do the details, is that when we glue two punctures on the same Riemann surface, the final formula that we will get will be identical to what we had arrived at in for gluing two punctures on two different Riemann surfaces. Okay. But the intermediate steps will be a little different. Right? Instead of having two sigma 1 and sigma 2 when you take the inner product, right? What if you have two punctures on the same Riemann surface? Okay, suppose there are two punctures which we call the n minus 1 puncture and nth puncture. Then this correlation function, product over these and product over this you have to now think of as some sigma, which I'll explain what this sigma is. So this is the tensor product. This takes value in the tensor product of two copies of the Hilbert space. And so this sigma should also be in the tensor product of two copies of the conjugate Hilbert space. Okay, conjugate here I refers to the PS conjugate. And then with this starting point, you can follow more or less what we did earlier using complete set of basis states and so on. And you can arrive at a final answer, right, which has the interpretation that we have a genus G amplitude, okay, and then we are connecting two vortices back up there, two of the states back up there. Okay, but as I said, intermediate stages will be a little different. Okay, so now we turn to our main goal, okay, which will be to see how a string amplitude can be thought of as a sum over finite diagrams. Okay. We will not try to derive, we will not at this stage, we will not try to derive those Feynman rules by starting from a quantum field theory, okay, which will be eventually done, okay, but not now. Okay. But we will simply see how a given string amplitude can be thought of as sum over finite diagrams. Okay. And here when I am talking about a given string amplitude, okay, this corresponds to integration over the entire section. Okay, not only local part of the section, right, but a string amplitude by definition integrates over the entire section of this here. Okay, which means it has to cover the whole of the base. Okay, so let me start with 3-point amplitude. Okay, and I will be working off shell. So 3-point amplitude should be an integration over P03. Right? Genus 0 with 3 point. But M03 is 0 dimensional. It's just a point. And the moduli space of a 3 punctured sphere has there is no modulus, right? We just fix 3 points, which you can take to be anything that you like by L2C, and then that's it. So M is 0 dimensional, which means that the section that you are looking for is really a point. Right? You have nothing to integrate over. Okay? You choose a section and then you evaluate the amplitude there. the choice of the section corresponds to choice of local coordinates at the 3 punctures. Okay. So suppose W1, Wi for I equal to 1 to 3 are local coordinates and punctures. Then the 3-point amplitude and Z is A5 Wi near Wi equal to 0. Okay. So Z is the global coordinate on the plane. Z is the global coordinate on the sphere, which you can also think of as a complex plane with a point of infinity identified. Then the 3-point amplitude is 1 dot 010. And on the sphere. Or on the plane, the same. Sphere and plane are using interchangeably. And this means that A1 is inserted in the coordinate system W1. Okay, because F1 relates Z1 to W1. Is this clear? Right? So if these are primaries, if these are primaries, say of dimension hi bar, then this is given by f1 prime of 0 to be called hi is product over I. Okay? But in general it's more complicated. If i's are not primaries, then the transformation is not simply this. Okay? There are additional transformation derivatives of A and so on. But it's just a conformal formula. Right? So you can work out what it will be depending on the formula. So this is a completely well defined quantity as long as F1, F2 and F3 are given. So offset 3-point amplitude will depend on the choice of the section. Right, F1, F2 and F3. So we'll use a notation. We'll call this, denote this by this curly bracket A1, A2, A3. This is the definition. Okay? And you can ask, is there a Feynman diagram interpretation of this? Okay, the Feynman diagram interpretation of this will be simply that it comes from this 3-point vortex. Well, we just think of this 3-point vortex as being given by this expression over here. Okay, the external states A1, A2 and A3. Okay, if you have external state A1, A2 and A3. Okay, we will define this 3-point vortex to be this, and that's the only diagram which will contribute to this 3-point amplitude. Right? 3-point amplitudes get contribution only from 3-point vortex. Is this clear? Right? This is in essence by definition. Right? I just define the 3-point vortex to be whatever you get. Okay, however, there are some consistency checks that you have to worry about. Oh, I should have also said that I didn't include any by this minus 2 pi to that factor because that's 1 in this case. Right? You can check that for n equal to 3 and g equal to 0. Right? That 3 minus 3 cancels and it becomes 1, so that's why I have not included it. Okay. Now in the field theory, the 3-point vortex has a symmetry. Okay? That's a permutation symmetry. So in a field theory, A1, A2, A3 will be the same as A1, A2, A1, A3 or A2, A3, A1 and so on. Yeah, 6 terms all are equal. And it doesn't make any difference if you permute the external lengths. And that's the way I define vortex in field theory. Now, is this true here? Okay, so let's see if this is true here. Okay, so let's suppose you try to calculate A2, A3, A1. A2, A3, A1. So we will write this as F1 dot A2 of 0, F2 dot A3 of 0, and F3 dot A1 of 0. Okay, it doesn't look the same as this. And in general, for a generic choice of F1, F2, F3, these will not be the same. On shell, they will be the same. Okay, why will they be the same on shell? Because on shell, the nature of the function doesn't matter, you just insert it at F2 of 0, F3 of 0, sorry, F1 of 0, F2 of 0, and F3 of 0. Okay. And there you know that any three points can be permuted to any other 3 by SL2C transform, which is the symmetry of the on shell amplitude. Okay, but for a generic off-shell state, this is not in general true. Whereas in a field theory, even for off-shell amplitude, we have a symmetry, right? The 3-point vortex is symmetric under exchange of A1 into an.
So from this, we can also say that if for time means for
Then if HIs are all 0, right?
this will be 1 and this we can readjust by SL2C.
Exactly, this you can readjust by SL2C transformation. Okay, so now the question is, can you do that readjustment here by SL2C transformation? Okay, it doesn't look the same, but it could still be the same, right? Even for off-shell amplitude. So let's see under what condition this is the same as the original amplitude. Okay, so let's suppose the Zi is by definition Fi of 0. Okay. Now there is an SL2C transformation. There exists SL2C transformation G, Z goes to G of Z, such that G of Z1 equal to Z2, G of Z2 equal to Z3, G of Z3 equal to Z1. Right? SL2C transform can take any 3 points and move to anything. Right? So there is certainly a SL2C transformation with this property. So what we can do is that we can start with A2, A3, A1. Take that expression over here, which is given, and transform this by G. Yeah, just make an SL2C transformation of this by G. What will be the effect of that? That will transform each of these by G, right, from the left. Okay. So it will be G dot F1 dot A2 of 0, G dot F2 G of 0, and G dot F3 of A1 of 0. Right? This is just composition in terms of function, right? G dot F3. So G dot F1 is a function of Z, is basically G of F1 Z, right? That's the notation. You apply G on F1, right? That's the way we compose functions. Now, this has achieved part of the goal, because now you see that where is A2 inserted? A2 is inserted at G of F1 0. Right? That's G of Z1. Right? F1 0 is Z1. So G of Z1 is Z. Right? So A2 has been inserted at Z. Right? Which is what it was for A1, A2, A3. So you can check that each of these are now inserted at the correct point. Okay? But that is not enough for this amplitude to be the same as the original amplitude. Right? It's not enough that they are inserted at the correct point. But if as optional amplitudes these have to be the same, they have to be also inserted with the correct function. Okay? So we need for symmetry G of F1Z is equal to F2Z. Right, let me call it W. Okay, this is a much stronger constant than demanding that this holds only at W equal to 0. Right? This is now a relationship between the functions. Right? The whole function f2 of W must be G of F1 W. Right? The function f3 of W must be G of F2 W, and so on. In general, the functions f1, f2, f3 may or may not satisfy this property. Right? If they don't satisfy this property, then the vortex is not symmetric. Okay? The conventional formulation of string theory tries to look for functions which just satisfy this property. Okay, and indeed such functions are known. Okay, there are vortex functions, there are specific choices of the functions which does satisfy this property. Okay, not only for this, but it has to satisfy this property for other permutations also, right? There will be different G, because imagine that we have 1, 2, 3 going to 2, 1, 3, right? Like this one. Right? It exchanges, so you have to look for a G that exchanges Z1 and Z2, keeping Z3 fixed. Right? And then with that G, then we have to satisfy that G of F1 is F2, G of F2 is F1, and G of F3 is F3. Okay? So these are in general the kind of constraints that you have to satisfy if you want the vortex to be symmetric. And as I said, for string theory, there are such symmetric vortices that are known. But this is not the only possible option. Okay, there is another possible option, which is what I will try to describe now, because there is a general class of string field theories do not always have to use vortices of this kind.
Except this, not only this, if there is a function g tilde which takes f2 w to f1 w, f1 w.
It has to take.
It means for a1, a3, a2. For if we want to show them symmetric, we have to show for all combinations.
That's it. Yes.
So g's will be defined for those two.
Exactly.
So that will.
So these are fixed once the points are fixed.
Yes, and that will very much constant by f1, f2, f3, what forms they can take. But to begin with, we said that any means around the circle,
Yes.
we can define with any function that is well defined at least around the circle where we are identifying the z with.
Yes, that's it.
that my question is that to begin with we started saying that it can be valid for any general F. As
Yes.
long as it is well behaved.
So at that level, when you are trying to define just the optional amplitude, we say you can use any F. Okay? But now we are trying to see if it has a field theory interpretation, right? So you could define optional amplitude A1, A2, A3, which is not symmetric under A1, A2, A3 exchange, right? It is okay as an optional amplitude, but such an optional amplitude cannot come from a field theory, right? Well, optional amplitudes that we get from field theory are symmetric,
Yes, sir.
right? So if you want symmetric optional amplitudes, then you have to restrict your choice of F. Right? Not every choice of F can be reinterpreted as a optional amplitude, as an optional amplitude that comes from a field theory.
So we are not discarding the other Fs. We are just saying that if you want a symmetric.
Yeah, and if you want a field theoretic interpretation, then you need a specific kind of F.
Isn't it?
Yeah, right.
I mean, these are essentially infinite number of equations, right? Because F1, F2, F3 could have been, I mean, in reasonable function.
Yes, exactly. I mean, infinite number of equations, but you also have infinite number of freedom, right? F1 itself is a whole function, right? You could choose F1 in different ways. See, G is fixed. G is a particular SL2C transformation, right? While the positions are fixed, Z1, Z2, Z3, then G has no choice. I mean, G is completely fixed, right? Then the form of F1, F2 and F3 are up to you, right? And the question you are asking is it possible to find choice forms of F1, F2 and F3 which satisfy this? Right? It may or may not be possible, right? So what I am claiming is that it is in fact possible to find such F1, F2 and F3. But the price you pay is that those F1, F2, F3 are not themselves SL2C transformation. Okay, they in general have singularities away from that circle where it is supposed to be defined. Away from the disk where it is supposed to be defined.
Is it possible just to symmetrize this, like taking a symmetric sum of?
Yeah, so that's what I am going to do now. Right? So this is the most general case that if this condition is not satisfied, right, you basically have to symmetrize. Okay? So option 2, is less matrix. Okay, so we define our A1, A2, A3. Okay, now we can start with any choice of functions F1, F2, F3, and you define this to be F1. A1, 0. Plus all commutations of A1 and A2. Okay, this you can start taking, then it's manifested by construction symmetry. And you can make it a little better by ensuring that after you have taken a permutation, you now make an SL2C transformation so that at least the points are brought back, the arguments are brought back to the same point. That you can always do. Then, because imagine that this is, take an example, something like this, right? This one looks different. Now this is equal to this. And this is an identity, the fact that is equal to this, right? And this has the property that A2 is inserted at the same point as in the original expression, right? Is inserted at G of F1 0, right? Which is F2 of 0 by construction. Right? G has been defined that way. But the function has changed. Right? G dot F1 is not the same as F2 in general. Right? So you average over these 6 choices. Right? And that's how you find your option amplitude. So pictorially what this means is the following, right? We had our P03. Okay, this time the base is a point, right? So there is really nothing to integrate over. Right? Choosing a section means choosing a point on this fiber. Right? But what we are doing here is that we are basically choosing 6 points on this fiber and averaging. Right? So this is what I call generalized section. Section. Okay, we allow averaging over sections. Okay, this is in principle allowed. Okay, just weighted average of sections. Right? It's a formal object. Right? But integral over weighted average of sections is a particularly defined object. Right? It's just weighted average of the integrals.
Fiber is a vector space or not?
Pardon?
Fiber is a vector space?
Fiber no, fiber is not necessarily vector space. Fiber is it's a choice of functions, right?
Yeah.
So there is no natural notion of adding 2 points on the fiber. Fiber is specified by all choice of possible local coordinates, right? The choice of F1, F2 and F3.
Given 2 choices, if I add them, don't I have another choice?
So what is the meaning of adding 2 functions, right? I mean, you choose one F1, F2, F3 and another F1 tilde, F2 tilde, F3 tilde, right? These are 2 points that describe the fiber. Okay? Now what is the meaning of adding them?
I mean,
Choice F1, F2, F3 and F1 tilde, F2 tilde, F3 tilde. Adding them doesn't make any, doesn't give another choice of functions, right? F1 had F2 had F3 had, for example.
my friend, small coordinate transformations correspond to vector fields. If I add the corresponding to vector fields.
But these are not necessarily small coordinate transformations, right? 2 completely different choice of functions. F1, F2, F3 and F1 tilde, F2 tilde, F3 tilde, right? They are not necessarily related by small deformation.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so fiber doesn't have vector space structure, that's why it's a formal sum. Right? It doesn't really make sense to say it's 1/3 of this plus this plus this as far as fiber is concerned. Right? You just write it as a formal sum. Okay? But eventually you are supposed to describe as it as an integral over the fiber direction, right? Over the section. Okay? So formal sum basically means that when you integrate over the formal sum, okay, it's the sum over the integrals. Okay? That's the definition of formal sum over fiber points. Or formal sum over sections. Yeah, so you will use this generalized section, okay, for this construction because that releases us from having to choose the vertices of this one. Okay. Although it is certainly possible to construct vertices which satisfy the desired property, then you don't have to do this formal sum. You can just stick to one set of functions and do this. But those restrict the choice because, as I said, you cannot find an SL2C transformation, okay, which achieves this. Right? F1, F2 and F3 cannot be chosen to SL2C transformation and at the same time satisfy the identities like this. Whereas if you allow formal sums like this, then as we will see in an example, you can use SL2C transformation.
So the way with at least for the on-shell amplitudes, the way we found this amplitude A1, A2, A3 is like this omega 0 form.
Yes.
So from that, can we say that from some property of omega 0 form applied from that, can we say that is
Not property. It's not, see, omega 0 doesn't know anything about the choice of section. Right? Omega 0 is defined about the whole of PG. Right? So it's not any property of omega 0. Right? But what I am saying is that this integral of omega 0, right? In this case, I am writing integral, but it's really not an integral, it's a point. Right? Integral of omega 0 over sum over I. So 1/6 sum over I times EI. CI. Okay? Where these are each sections. Right? Each of these points. This is ill-defined. Right? What do you mean by 1/6 sum over I CI? It's a formal object. Right? But this, by definition, is 1/6 sum over I integral CI omega 0. Okay? This is a perfectly well-defined object. Right? We can integrate omega 0 over CI, right? Which means evaluate omega 0 for those points. Right? In this case. And then you take the average. Is this clear? Right? So you will use this notion of formal sum, but this is what one means. That's how to do it.
for the gluing also we need to glue on all the punctures and then take the sum.
Yes, I am coming to gluing. Okay, so at this stage there is no gluing. It's a 3-point function, right? Once you come to 4-point function, that notion will come.
So the definition of formal sum also depends on the choice of vertex operator.
No. This didn't depend on A1, A2 and A3, right? A1, A2, A3 could be anything. What local coordinates you choose are not dependent on A1, A2, A3, right?
No.
So they are completely independent choices. This formal sum of sections, right? This is fixed for a given theory. And then for the same thing you can use different A1, A2 and A3. So this one depends on A1, this omega 0, right, depends on A1, A2, A3. Yeah, that's why the dependence on A1, A2, A3 comes from. But this CI is how you sum, right, what you integrate over. That doesn't depend on A1, A2, A3. Okay, so now that we have defined our 3-point function, we are going to try to build our 4-point function just from Feynman diagrams. Right? Imagine that you are doing a field theory. How will you compute the 4-point function? Okay, so 4-point function of A1, A2, A3, A4. These are the external states. So you start drawing Feynman diagram. Okay, if you have a cubic vortex, these are the Feynman diagrams we will draw. Okay, and for this propagator, we will use the propagator that we have found in our earlier analysis, what we call the propagator, right? When during the plumbing fixture, we have the propagator will be this phi NC times L0 plus V0 V0 bar, L0 plus L0 bar inverse delta L0 L0 bar phi NC, and you have a factor of 2 outside, right? These are the propagator. This is exactly the propagator that we are going to use for each of these. Okay, and for a 3-point function, we will use the same 3-point function that we found earlier. Okay, which are fixed by the choice of F1, F2, F3.
So right now we are not considering this 4-point pattern.
No, not yet. Okay, but we have to introduce it as we will see. So now we can do what we did yesterday, but going backwards. Okay. Yesterday we saw that when you do plumbing fixture, that has the interpretation of 2 amplitudes joined by propagator. Okay. Now we are not doing plumbing fixture, we have 2 amplitudes joined by propagator. Okay. But going backwards, you see that this can be thought of, okay, this quantity, this expression can be reinterpreted as a 4-puncture sphere. Right? Because it's just plumbing fixture. We have seen that this gluing to what is the propagator is equivalent plumbing fixture. Okay. So what we will generate by these amplitudes are 4-puncture spheres that we can get from plumbing fixture of 2 3-puncture spheres. Is that clear?
What about the contact 4-point?
Yes, I am coming to that. We have not introduced it yet, but we will see why we did it. Right? Right now, so far you have introduced only 3-point function. Right? But we will see that we have to introduce contact 4-point function. Right? And what it will be determined from this analysis.
This only covers that part of the moduli space where two of the points are pairwise coming close to each other.
Exactly. That's
That's
it.
but it does not.
Yeah, well, it covers some region around that point.
Yeah.
Because we are not taking S to be exactly infinity, right? We are taking S from 0 to infinity. So it covers regions around those points.
But when the 4 points are distinctly far apart, doesn't cover.
Yes, exactly.
So it's only the OP approximation. It is.
Well, we are not making an approximation, it's an exact statement, right? That this covers part of the integration of the moduli space.
Right, but when pairwise points are reasonably close.
Or to reasonably close to each other, exactly. Okay, so let me draw the diagram here, it will become clear fully. So if we draw P04, this is the base M04. Each of S, P and U channel diagram describes some section of P04, right? Because this, for example, covers part of P04, where the vertex of pointers for 1 and 2 are close by. Right? Because if you look at the sphere, right, on one sphere you have 1 and 2, on the other sphere you have 3 and 4, and they are connected by long tube. Okay, that is conformally equivalent to 1 and 2 being close to each other. Okay. So this is S channel diagram, this is T channel diagram, this is U channel diagram set. Okay. But we are left with, in general, we will be left with some regions, right? Unless you are very lucky, okay, and you are, I mean, for open string theory, you are in fact lucky that the 3-point functions, by doing 3-point function, you can cover the entire moduli space, okay, but that's not usually the case. So you will be left with some gaps, and the idea is that you just fill this gap by some choosing some sections here. Okay, so this part you can explain from those diagrams, but these parts you cannot explain. They don't come from anything that we have done so far, right? So now we introduce a 4-point function, 4-point vertex. Okay, you introduce a 4-point vertex of A1, A2, A3, A4. Okay, denote this by A1, A2, A3, A4, and by definition this is minus 2 pi I inverse integral over the dotted region, over the dotted part of the section of omega 2. This is a 2-dimensional moduli space, right? 4-point square is 2-dimensional moduli space. Okay. For these diagrams, those 2-dimensional moduli spaces are coming from the integration over the S and theta values of these propagators. But now, for the rest, there is no such parameters necessarily, but there is some integral that we have to do. And this is the definition of A1, A2, A3. Okay, the dependence on A1, A2, A3 for come because omega 2 will depend on A1, A2, A3. Right, now we can introduce the measure. Okay. And I'll just to avoid confusion, I'll also add to this omega the genus and the number of counters. So this is our G, this is our N. Okay, so I'll make life little more complicated by writing the omega as omega G and P. Okay, so that it becomes clear where that in which moduli space it's a form, right? It's a P form on PGN, right? That's what this notion will be. So is this clear?
So to cover the whole PGM, you have to introduce.
Exactly. So to cover the whole, not the whole PGN, but whole MGN, the whole section,
That's not whole section, sir.
right? You have to introduce
Whole
this
section, sir.
as additional terms,
How do we
additional
get,
processes.
How do we know that it will cover all of it?
By construction. Because whatever is not covered is this dotted line. Right? So by construction we have made this 4-point vortex. Choosing the 4-point vortex in such a way that we cover the whole moduli space. Okay? So from that point of view, there is nothing special about the 4-point vortex. Whatever is missing, you put it back. Okay? But there is something special about this 4-point vortex, and that is the following. What is special about this is that this integration, this dotted region, does not include any degeneration. Why? Because all the degenerations, where 4 goes to 1, or 4 goes to 2, or 4 goes to 3, have already been included in these diagrams. Okay? So this dotted region could be computed integration over the moduli space or over the section, but it's a perfectly finite quantity. Okay? That's the important part. Okay? It doesn't suffer from any of the divergences that you had in integrating over the moduli space. Okay? All the divergences which could have been there, okay, from the S integral, from the S equal to infinity region, that's the region where the points are coming close to each other. There you have already replaced those divergences by analytic continuation by writing that integral as 1 over L0 plus L01.
Since here is no long tube, nothing is coming through.
Pardon?
In this 4-point function, since there is no long tube, nothing is coming through.
Exactly, that's right. So this region has no long tube. Okay? So where there is long tube, ds to the minus s times L0 plus L01. This could be in principle divergent if L0 plus L01 was negative. Right? But we have by hand removed the divergence by declaring this to be 1 over L0 plus L01. Right? That is the analytic continuation that we have chosen to use. Okay? So now you see that with this prescription, the 4-point function has no divergence from any kind. Right? Normally you avoid this divergence by analytic continuation, but here the analytic continuation is done explicitly at this level. Okay? You interpret this not as integral over s, but as 1 over L0 plus L01, as 3-point vortex is connected by a propagator. And then we add to this diagram, which is this. And the sum of this gives the offset 4-point function, right? Which involves integral over omega 2 0 4 over the full section. Is this part clear?
So the covering the whole section means that we are summing over all the 24 such 4-point.
Yes, if you use that, right, then each of these, right, we are thinking of this not as one line but weighted average, right? So the diagram is definitely going to be more complicated because each of these is actually weighted average of 6, right? If not 6 times 6, right? Because you have a weighted average of 6 on this side, 6 on that side, right? So 36, 1 over 36 times average over 36 times is what we are doing. Okay? But the general philosophy is the same, right? As long as the S goes to the large S regions, right, the degenerate regions are gone. Okay? Whatever is not covered, right, with the appropriate weight factor, you put in the definition of the 4-point function.
The 4-point function, the 4-point vortex, they also we know comes with symmetric factors.
Yes, so you have to also, put the appropriate symmetric factor there. Right? So this is the way I have normalized. This is actually the vortex, not the Lagrangian. Right? Down with the Lagrangian, we have 1 over 4 factorial. Right? So we write the Lagrangian from here. Okay, we have to introduce 1 over 4 factorial times 5 to 4 kind of thing. This is what you get at the vortex.
And so the disconnected diagrams don't come up anyway, like in field theory.
Disconnected diagrams you are not counting here. Yeah, we are just summing over 5 connected diagrams because in the field theory, the disconnected diagrams in any case will cancel from the Oh, by discrete diagrams you mean something like this.
Just 1 limit, 2, 3.
Yeah, meaning in principle you could do this. I mean, you could count this by using the usual field theory techniques, right?
I just meant just this. Just 1 limit.
Yeah, that's also possible. Yeah. So in string theory, right,
How does it?
these will not be given as Riemann surfaces. I mean, diagrams like this, right, will be given as disconnected Riemann surfaces. The two-part function comes in a different way, right? That's also true in field theory, right? The two-part function is not coming from a vortex, but is the inverse of the propagator.
Maybe like 2 cylinders.
Two cylinders, exactly.
So this is not even included in the sphere.
This is, well, this,
Where you have done the calculation.
yeah, this guy, yeah, this is not in the sphere 4-point function doesn't know about this. Sphere 4-point function on that you calculate actually knows about some of the connected diagrams. Right? Just 2-point function, right? If you try to derive from in a field theory, this is not the usual Feynman diagram, but you get delta function. But you can consider things like this. Well, for 4-point function you cannot write, but you could imagine for a 6-point function diagrams like this. Right? These are 2 3-point vortices. In the Riemann surface interpretation, this will be disconnected spheres. Right? You can have 2 spheres. 3-point function on this one, 3-point function on that one. And that will give rise to diagrams of this kind. But as in field theory, the 2-point function has a different origin.
So can't I think of this as some degeneration limit of higher Riemann surface?
No, it's not degeneration limit. It's really disconnected diagram. Okay? This is not going to come from a degeneration limit of a higher Riemann surface. For a higher Riemann surface, you are supposed to integrate over everything, right? Degeneration limit, this includes the degeneration limit, right? You have 1 over L0 plus L0 part. So, you don't think of this as a degeneration limit, these are really disconnected diagrams.
So in field theory also, when we calculate the amplitudes, we only construct connected.
Normally, yes, because the disconnected diagram is just a product of connected ones.
Yes.
But in principle, you do have these diagrams in field theory. Right? And the forward scattering, right? Which one was saying, there's just this, right? Which gives just a delta function. Right? 2 pi to the d times delta of moment of function.
The string amplitude, this cancellation from the denominator was exactly like in field theory.
Yes.
The factors.
So you don't see that in normal string amplitude, the denominator factor is never there. Right? The numerator, bubbles are gone, you never include.
Because of the same.
But yeah, if you start from a string field theory and try to derive the Feynman rules, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Okay. But let me also emphasize again that we have not derived this Feynman rules starting from a field theory, right? Which we'll do eventually, but right now we are just trying to get the Feynman rules, right? Show that the string amplitudes can be reinterpreted as the sum of Feynman diagrams, right? Without commenting, without explaining where those Feynman diagrams come from, right? Where the Feynman rules originate from. So now we see that this procedure can be continued, right? There is nothing which stops us at 4-point. Okay? So for 5-point amplitude, we have many diagrams, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is one diagram, all permutations, various ways of drawing this diagram. Then we have things like this. Okay, so you sum over all of these diagrams. And what it will give is each of these diagrams will give you integration over part of sections of P05.
So these include 3-point and 4-point vertices only.
Yes, include 3 and 4-point vortices. Okay, this for example is only 3-point vortex, this includes 1 3-point, 1 4-point vortex. Just for the standard rules of quantum field theory. And the fact that each of these individual vortices have the interpretation as integration over Riemann surface, allows us to reinterpret this by plumbing fixture as integration over a 5-part sphere. That's all we are using. Okay? Whatever we did yesterday, that where we started from a plumbing fixture and showed that it can thought of as 2 amplitudes glued together. I'm just now applying it in reverse. Okay? 2 amplitudes with connected by propagator can be reinterpreted as a plumbing fixture of the corresponding amplitudes that we get from here. Okay, and hence the covered part of this. Okay. And the important point is that these regions that you get from this includes all possible degeneration of the 5-point function. Okay, anytime 2 points come close to each other, that's a degeneration. That is already included in all of these diagrams, or maybe some of these diagrams. Is that point clear? Okay. For example, where 1 and 2 come together, okay, is included in is sum of all diagrams of this kind, where 1 and 2 join together into a 3-point vortex, right? Because this propagator, when this length goes to infinity, okay, that means that 1 and 2 are coming together and everything else is separated. Okay. What happens in this side is irrelevant, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is also part of the contribution to the same degeneration. That when 1 and 2 are coming together, this in the S goes to the infinite limit also includes a region where 1 and 2 are coming together. Okay, and 3, 4, 5 are separated.
This will include 5-point function, 5-point vertex.
Well, 5-point vortex is these ones. So after you have gotten these, whatever is needed to make it into a section that the full section, the dotted lines. Okay, this will now define as a 5-point function. So the 5-point function 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will be integration over the dotted part of the section and the section of omega, this time omega 0, 5, and this is a 4-dimensional moduli space. Yeah, you can count 4 because in this diagram, for example, there is a S and theta from here and S and theta from here, right? That's 4 parameters. Here, there is an S and theta from here, and there is a 2-dimensional integral, sorry, S and theta from here and 2-dimensional integral sitting here. Right? A 4-point vortex. So that again is 4 dimensional. So each of them covers a 4-dimensional subspace of M04. And what is not covered is included in the definition of the 5-point function. Okay, this is what I will call now A1 to A5. And the important point again that we emphasize is the fact that this is perfectly fine. There is no divergence in here. So all the regions where possible divergences could arise from, where points are coming close to each other, have already been subtracted out because those are coming from these regions. Right? Those are coming from diagrams with some propagator equilibrium. Is this point clear?
Sir, how is a 4-point or 4-point vertex different from like the first diagram in which the propagator length goes to 0? Like,
well, the point is that when the propagator length goes to 0, right, we will do the example next time. When the propagator length goes to 0, right, it doesn't go to the boundary. It's still a point in the moduli space where the points are reasonably close to each other. Right? So the full region is not covered. See, if you look at this diagram, this bound where what are these boundaries? Right? Boundaries are precisely where propagator length is going to 0. Right? Because you are not going from S, you are not allowing S to be negative. Okay? So that's why it stops at some point. Right? This stops at some point. If you are lucky, if there is no gap between these two, then you don't have to use a 4-point function. Okay? But typically you will find that there are gaps. Okay, that's why you need to fill them by using a explicit 4-point function. So if you are lucky, it may happen that the region S equal to 0 to infinity, when you add S, T and epsilon in diagrams, it covers everything. Okay? And as I said, that happens for Witten's open string field theory. And that's the only theory for which it happens. Okay? For a generic string field theory, okay, typically there will be gaps left over, which you have to fill. Okay? Sometimes, if you are not very careful, right, you may overcover some region. Right? It may become like this. Okay? Which is also okay. That basically means that you have to now fill it like this. Right? So when it goes this way, that means you have to subtract that contribution. Right? And again, as long as it's a finite contribution, it doesn't matter whether you are adding or subtracting. Okay, you get a finite result. Okay? The important point in the definition of the vortices, you never go into the region of the moduli space where there are divergences. Okay? That's why vortices are perfectly finite. Okay? And while in the process of building Feynman diagrams, you don't encounter divergences because these integrals have already replaced by 1 for L0 plus L0.
If the propagator length we are shrinking, that means massive modes are.
Yes, S equal to 0, you can say, okay, massive modes are propagating, but if you recall, the way you had defined S equal to 0, right, that still corresponds to a large S naught to be S naught large, right? So, massive modes propagation is still suppressed. Okay, that's the, it's not necessary to choose the what exactly, but it's convenient, right? So that you are assured of convergence and so on. That when you sum over, whenever there is a propagator like this, you are summing over infinite number of intermediate states, right? And you want that sum to be convergent, right? So, and for that it is useful if you apply it only when the points are close to each other. Okay, and that corresponds to, even though S is equal to 0, right? It still has an exponential suppression. Okay? Because of the scaling that we have introduced in the local coordinates. The lambda, exactly. Other questions?
So there will be ambiguities in the way I complete the section.
Yes. So certainly. So this, how you fill this, right? The boundaries are fixed, but otherwise you could choose like this. Okay? So there is this. So there is ambiguity in introducing optional 5-point function. Okay? At the end, of course, you have to make sure that the physical quantities don't depend on this. Okay? And in the context of string field theory, what one can show is that the different string field theory that one gets by filling up this region in different ways are all related by field definition. Right? And as you know, field definition can change the definition of the optional Green's function, but doesn't change any of the physical quantities. Right? This is something one can show explicitly, that different class subsections to fill these gaps actually just correspond to field definition of the string field theory.
If we choose a different section which is actually just by moving in the direction of PGN only, that we can certainly say that it will not depend on
PGN. Oh, meaning if you just reparameterize the section in a different way.
it. If we reparameterize the section in such a way that we have just moved along PGN, at every point we have just moved along PGN, then it shouldn't matter.
No, yeah, it shouldn't matter, but the optional amplitude, it does matter.
For the option it will matter.
Exactly.
Actually,
Yeah, for optional amplitude, it shouldn't matter. Exactly. Okay, but the point is that you have to see, in usual optional amplitude, it doesn't matter. But once you take into account renormalization effects and so on, okay, the definition of on-cell itself changes. Okay, so there you have to be more careful. But once you can show that it's a field definition, okay, then that takes into account also renormalization and everything else. Okay, the finite renormalization of the masses and so on. Now, so far I have talked about trees, but the same thing can be done for loops. Okay, so let me just that briefly. To take a 3-point function, and join two of the vortices, two of the external links by a propagator. Pardon?
type of plane, like.
Yeah, it's a second type of plane. So this can be reinterpreted as a second kind of plane. Right? So what is this object? This is a one-point function on the torus.
Yes, sir.
Okay? You have three punctures here, so you took two punctures and then glued them. Right? So that has a topology of a torus. So this gives you one-point function on the torus. So these are two real parameters, right? Because this gluing S and theta are two real parameters. P10, sorry, P11, okay, one puncture torus, G equal to 1, N equal to 1. Here is M11. M11, okay, one puncture torus has precisely two real parameters. In the moduli space of one puncture torus, has two real parameters because the location of the puncture is fixed because of the translation invariance of the torus. And the torus has a tau parameter. Okay? And that integration of a tau parameter is precisely provided by this S and theta integral. Okay? And now again the point is that the tau goes to I infinity region, which is the cause of divergence typically. That in this language will come from the S goes to infinity region. Where we don't think of this as an integration over S, we think of this as a 1 over L0 plus L0 bar. That you treat it as a field theory rather than as an integration over the moduli space. So this will cover part of the moduli space, part of M11. Okay? In general, part will be left. So you have to add a one-point function explicitly to take care of this part. Okay, this is something new which you don't see in field theory normally. In field theory, you figure P-level Lagrangian once and for all, and then you do your calculation. Right? At loop level, you don't have loop vortices. Right? There is a renormalization, but that will be interpreted as, I think, because already they are at the T level. Right? Here, what you see is that once you go to one loop, you have to add a one-point function represented by this. Right? A single line can disappear. So we'll denote it by A1. If this is A1, 1. Okay. So I'm not going to change the notation a little bit. Earlier I have defined these objects, right? A1 to N. This is the n-point vortex. Okay. I'll attach now a level 0 to this, all of these. Okay, just to denote that these are the n-point vortex that you have to add at genus 0. Okay, at 0 loop, tree level. But once you start doing one loop calculation, you have to add new vortex, which you see at this level, one-point function of the torus, A11. Okay, this is a linear term, this will be a linear term in the action. Okay, but right now we are not writing an action, you are just thinking of this as a vortex. Okay? There will be one-point function you have to add explicitly, which Feynman diagram wise looks like this. Is this point clear?
So this means giving weight to the field.
Well, we have not introduced any fields or anything. Okay? This just is in the action. We have not given wave plane. It can cause some fields to get wet. Okay? But right now, we are not shifting our expansion point. Okay? What it is saying is that keeping the expansion point as whatever it was originally, okay, the action will have a term which is linear in the field. It can happen, right? The action can have a term linear in the field. Right? This is saying that the action, a one-point function like this can only come from a term in the action that is linear in the field. Right? Just like a cubic vortex comes from an action term which is cubic in the field, right? So when you try to reinterpret this in terms of the action, indeed it will be a linear term in the action. Okay? Right now, all you are saying is the Feynman rules are such that you have to add a term in the Feynman rule which is linear in this. Is this clear?
This is just to cover the dotted region.
Yes, this is just to cover the dotted region.
So why doesn't the upper diagram this A1, A2, A3, 0 in this notation cover the entire section?
Typically it doesn't. Particularly you are adding stops to these vortices, right? Okay. So when S goes to 0, right, effectively you still have long tubes left over.
These two.
Yes. Right? The stops, which basically means that you have added, if you think of a 3-punctured sphere, right, you have just added some cylinders at the three vortices. Right? And then you are doing the rest.
Right.
Okay. So those two stops are still sitting there, right? Even at S equal to 0.
But this length need not be long, right? If it is.
See, if you think in terms of the original S naught, right, when there is an S naught, right, you are integrating S from S naught to infinity, right? If you think of S roughly as tau, right, by taking S naught sufficiently large, you are ensuring that you are only covering the region that is degeneration, right, when tau is close to I infinity. Right? Everything else in the tau plane is part of the dotted region, which you have to supply explicitly.
No, here it's integral though. But the tree level, I mean, the degeneration was always inverse of OP, right? I mean, effectively.
Yes,
But
here it is not.
Here there's
The
no
point is, so all degenerations in this language are S goes to infinity.
Because here there's no OP.
It doesn't look like OP, but
that
that
is forced to run.
yeah. So the point is that in this language, right, all degenerations are treated on equivalent footing. S goes to infinity. In T level, you on the sphere you see it as OP. Right? Here you see it as a degeneration of Riemann surface, so you have to handle degenerates. Right? But they are in the language that we are using, they are all of the same kind. They all have the same origin. Okay? Some cube length is going to infinity. And you are right. I mean, normally you think of these are just two different kinds of divergence, right? The divergence that you see on the sphere, which is coming from the OP, 2 points coming close to each other, and the divergence which is coming, which you see on the torus as a tube becoming long, that handle becoming long. They are in fact of the same kind. Okay, if you use this language. Okay, the language of building up the diagram from doing lot of functions. Right? The tau goes to I infinity is the S goes to infinity region. That is the cause of the divergence.
And the lower one is just a tube coming in and.
Yeah, this is just a tube, so it's like
A11.
A11, right? There is some function on the torus. If you think of this as a function torus, right? You still have to specify the local coordinates here. Right? Because you are trying to define official one-point function. But this local coordinate is induced from the original choice of local coordinate on the 3 punctures here. Because, see, in terms of gluing, you have 3 punctures. Right? You have local coordinate choice here, here, and here. And then you have glued these 2 points by W1, W2 equal to Q. Right? You still have, so that makes it into a torus. But it comes with the choice of local coordinates already here. Right? That's why it's a section. In this part, there is an ambiguity as to why we are on the fiber. Right? It's induced from the original choice of local coordinates on 3-point function. But just like for the other cases, how you extend it in the dotted region, right, is up to you. Right? You have many choices because you can make it go up, go down, and as long as the boundary points are kept fixed.
So in this diagram, where is the world-shaped loop in this A11? Where is the world-shaped loop? Somehow.
Where is it torus?
A11 exactly. Where is the torus? The world-shaped loop.
This one?
Yeah, this one.
Because this is coming. This, if you look at the amplitude, right, you start with a 3-point function, and then you glue these by W1, W2 equal to Q, right?
Right. So that is the handle.
That is handle.
Right.
So it becomes a 1-point function on the torus.
No, he asked about the lower
The
diagram.
lower one.
The one.
So the upper one is in mod Q going to infinity.
Here.
Yeah.
Oh, here because this is already part of P1. See this dotted region, okay, is a section of P11. P11 by definition is the what you get for a one puncture torus. Right? So you draw this dotted region only in P11, right? And the reason that you do this is because this region, the region that is induced from this graph, is drawn in P11. Right? So now you see whatever is left in P11 that you have to fill. Right? Because you know that you have to cover the whole moduli space of the torus. Right? The fundamental region. So you take the fundamental region, which is the same one, right? And you see how much of that region is covered by this one.
The remaining part doesn't seem to have a nice interpretation as a word sheet, it seems from this diagram, right?
From which diagram?
This A11, this.
Oh, this diagram.
Yeah, line
Oh, because this vortex, this is of order GS. This is of order GS square. So that's, you don't see this explicitly because this vortex, right, is actually a one loop vortex. This is induced at one loop. Right? So you don't see this diagrammatically because
word sheet, I don't see it at all.
yeah, you don't see the word sheet because that's inside this cross.
So, this is just a one puncture sphere, right? Which this
No, this one puncture torus. The one means this G equal to 1. You see what you are adding here. See, okay, it depends what you mean by one puncture torus. This is a one part function from a field theory viewpoint, right? This means, okay, what does this mean? This means that next time when you draw, say, when you try to compute, say, a 2-point function on the sphere, sorry, 2-point function on the torus, okay, you have to include diagrams like this. This is a 2-point function on the torus. This is part of the contribution to a 2-point function on the torus. Why? It looks like a tree diagram, right? But this vortex includes a torus. Okay, you don't see this because I have just drawn it as a cross. Okay? If you want to be more explicit, I could write it as cross 1. Okay, that's denote that this is something that is coming from a genus 1. Right? This has a hidden, the definition of this has hidden in it that it's actually a genus 1 amplitude. Okay? This computation of this, which is integration of this region, okay, is a genus 1 computation. Okay? It's a genus 1 offshell one part function, okay, integrated over part of the genus 1 moduli space.
From the non-degenerate part of moduli.
Not?
From the non-degenerate.
Yeah, from the non-degenerate part of moduli space, right? But this, because this cross, right, is actually an integral over a genus 1 moduli space. Right? It doesn't, you don't see it explicitly when I draw the diagram. Right?
if there is something which I'm calculating, it looks like a one-point function in field theory, but is actually calculated in a genus 1 circle.
Exactly.
Then how do we introduce this in Lagrangian?
So the full Lagrangian gets contribution from tree level, but also explicit terms are of order GS square. See, normally you think of the Lagrangian as coming from the tree level term, and then everything at order GS square you calculate explicitly, right, from Feynman diagrams. Here the Lagrangian itself contains terms of order GS square, and GS to the 4, and GS to the 6, and so on.
So the quantum field theory has more vertex than the classical field theory.
Exactly. Quantum field theory has more vertex than classical field theory. It sounds a little strange, right? And in fact, if you think in our Feynman rules, okay, and think in ordinary quantum field theory, it is a real, somewhat strange. But there is a nice physical interpretation of this, okay, and that is the following: that if you just start with the classical version of the quantum field theory that I wrote down and try to do usual path integral, okay, what you find is that the path integral measure has an anomaly. Okay? But it's not a genuine anomaly in the sense that that can be cancelled by adding local counter terms. Okay? So, in order to make the measure invariant under the gauge transformations, okay, you have to use a non-trivial measure, okay, not the usual measure which gives the usual Feynman rules. Okay? And the non-trivial measure can be reinterpreted as term in the action, okay, which has this additional order GS square and GS to the 4 kind of terms. Okay. So these terms that you are adding, okay, is an effect, is essentially a reflection of the non-invariance of the measure of the quantum field theory. Okay, you are compensating for the non-invariance by adding these extra terms in the action. Okay. But nevertheless, this is something that you don't normally see in a field theory. Right? In field theory, you write down the classical term and then everything at quantum level, you compute explicitly from 5 microns. Okay. Here, at every genus, you have to add explicit new vortices. Is this point clear?
So will there be contributions like that new vertex that you have introduced
Yes.
that joins to the previous one, and on that loop there is another line?
Yes. So there will be contributions like this, for example. Okay. This will be contribution to one point function in genus 2. Because there is a genus 1, this is genus 1, this is genus 1, right? So effectively, even though you don't see it, actually these two tori are sitting there. Okay, at the end of this vortex. Okay, because this is computed as integration of a part of the moduli space of a genus 1 one point function. Right? So there will certainly be. So once you have a vortex, you have to use Feynman rules that you in all possible ways that a vortex can be attached to a Feynman diagram. You have to do it. Right? So that part is exactly the same as in normal quantum field theory. Right? The only new thing is that you are adding new vortices at quantum level. Right? Quantum theory has more vortex than classical theory.
So at that, because if you look at a gravity theory which is non-normalizable, then to expect that to happen at every higher order, you should add new vertices.
But these are not counter terms.
No, these are not counted.
These are not counted because of the alpha diagram.
Yeah,
Yes.
but with finite coefficients, you are adding.
Finite coefficients, yes, with finite coefficients, yeah. But I don't know whether it's because of the theory of gravity, right? At least one doesn't see it directly. Okay, this correspondence that because you have it's a theory of
high
gravity.
dimensions, even 5 to the sum, that theory will also become non-normalizable. So explain.
Which one?
No, this, if you think of the scalar field, that will also be non-normalizable in general. I mean, one is not fixing the
See, the point is that even open string field theory is non-normalizable, right? Because it has a lot of higher string fields. There you don't have to add any of these vortices. If you use Witten's open string field theory, that covers the moduli space by itself, not only at tree level but also at the loop level. Because that's the only one, right, which does it without adding any extra vortex. So basically what it means is when you try to start drawing diagrams like this, right, it covers the entire section.
So why is it so? I mean, is there a one line concern?
Well, there is no one. I mean, you have to look at the explicit structure of the vortex, right? And you can see how it proves, and from that you can prove that it covers the entire moduli space. That whenever one diagram ends, another diagram starts. Okay, and that's the way it covers the full moduli space. But this is very special to that part. Only one portion of string field theory. Okay, all other generic portion requires this, that you have to add vortices. Not only at the classical level, as you saw, you have to add 4, 5, 6 point vortices, but even at quantum level, okay, at every genus, every loop order, you have to add new vortices. But those vortices, of course, do not affect the answer that you have calculated earlier in genus 1, genus 0, because these are higher order. Right? This comes from higher partial genus.
Do you think of this as shifting of the physical vacuum?
So, that comes later. The fact that if there is a linear time in the action, you have to shift the physical vacuum. Right? That you can do later, but this is not, that may be the effect, but that's not the cause. Right? If you just add a term, the Lagrangian has this term. That's what it is said there. And then to repair it, you have to shift the physical vacuum. Right? So shifting of the physical vacuum is the effect, not the cause.
What is the counterpart of this effect in Polyakov's prescription?
In Polyakov's prescription, of course, the integration of the moduli space includes everything. Right? So you don't decompose the thing as Feynman diagram. See, this feature comes only when you try to reinterpret this as how Feynman diagrams, right? That this Feynman diagram doesn't give the full genus 1 amplitude. That's why you have to add some extra one-point function to compensate for this. In the Polyakov prescription, by definition you integrate over the whole PGN, whole section. Right? The disadvantage of that prescription is this fact that in that prescription you are actually integrating over S. Right? And there is no a priori way of regularizing the divergences from S equal to infinity. Right? Whereas here, once you are trying to interpret it as a Feynman diagram way, right, that problem is not there. and S goes to infinity divergence, you never see, because always those divergences always come from diagrams like this, and there you basically replace it by one model simple things. Okay, so gain in one, but the price you pay is that you have to now keep adding expressive vertices at your point. And as I said, this looks strange at this level, okay? But when you actually write down the string field theory action and quantize it, you see that this is required for the invariance. Right? There are some anomaly in the path, the measure is not invariant for the H transformation, and it's precisely to compensate for that these terms are needed.
These terms are basically g to the power n, a to the power n. These are
Exactly, that's right. Yeah.
And n and m can run for 2 infinity, I mean, for large numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you have, in any given genus order, you have arbitrary nonlinear terms, and then you have such terms at every genus. Okay. There are some other features of this which I will discuss tomorrow. Okay, that this is one of the differences between this theory and the standard quantum field theory. Right? But there are some other differences which you will see.